Hello my dark darlings, and welcome back to Miss Macabre. Tonight I have some chilling horror stories for you to fall asleep to. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and let the darkness pull you in. And if you enjoy late night horror, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me again for more. Now, let's begin. By 32, Adrian Wells had almost given up on dating apps. As a software engineer in Chicago, his life had become a cycle of long hours, microwave dinners, and empty weekends. So when he matched with a woman named Lena on an app called Sparkline, he was cautiously optimistic. She was witty, attractive, and easy to talk to. Their messages were instant and intense. She remembered everything he said, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed almost eerily in sync with him. Within days, they were texting morning to night. Adrian told himself it was just rare chemistry. Then he suggested meeting in person. Lena had an excuse: work emergency, family issue, migraine. Every time he tried again, something came up. But she always made up for it by becoming even more attentive. She sent voice notes. She asked for selfies. She said she felt like she'd known him forever. Adrian was disappointed, but he didn't want to ruin something that felt promising. Then she started mentioning things he had never told her. The exact barbershop he used. The fact that he sometimes forgot to lock the passenger side of his car. The old scar on his shoulder from a high school baseball injury. When Adrian asked how she knew that, Lena sent back a laughing emoji and wrote, "You'd be surprised what people reveal without realizing it." He stopped laughing after that. A few days later, he came home from work and found his apartment door unlocked. Nothing looked stolen, but the air felt wrong. His framed college photo on the bookshelf had been turned slightly toward the couch. A kitchen cabinet he never used was open, and on his nightstand sat a printed photograph of himself sleeping in bed, taken from inside the room. On the back, in neat handwriting, were the words, "You look peaceful when you're not pretending." Adrian nearly vomited. He called the police, changed the locks, and deactivated the app. But Lena kept finding ways back in, emails from new addresses, texts from spoofed numbers, messages sent to his LinkedIn, a fake food delivery to his office, a package containing a toothbrush, a razor, and a note that said, "I'm making room for myself." His friends told him to stay with someone else. He did, for 2 nights. On the 3rd, he returned to his apartment with a co-worker to gather more clothes. That's when they found the camera. It was hidden inside a smoke detector above the bed. Police traced the app profile through payment records, burner emails, and eventually an IP address tied to a woman named Elena Voss, a former user, experienced designer who had been banned from multiple dating platforms for harassment. She had never once intended to meet Adrian on a real date. Instead, she had used his photos and personal details to build an obsessive fantasy around him. When officers searched her apartment, they found a corkboard covered in timelines, screenshots, receipts, and surveillance photos. Adrian's daily routine had been mapped down to the minute. She had duplicate keys made after following him to a hardware store and watching him leave them on the counter while paying. The worst discovery was in her closet. A suitcase packed with men's clothes in his size. She was arrested, but Adrian still moved. He no longer uses dating apps because sometimes the person on the other side of the screen isn't trying to get to know you. Sometimes they're trying to build a life around you before you even know they exist. In 2002, Hannah Mercer was 10 years old when her parents bought what they called their dream home, a large 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood with a finished basement, a fenced backyard, and a swimming pool that made her younger brother, Ben, scream with excitement the moment he saw it. For the first few weeks, it felt magical. Hannah remembers summer dinners on the patio, her mother planting flowers by the fence, and her father grinning every time he talked about how lucky they were. It was the kind of place that made kids believe they'd live there forever. Then the letters started. At first they seemed like childish pranks, plain white envelopes with no return address, left in the mailbox or tucked between the front door and the frame. Inside were short, unsettling messages written in blocky black letters. You don't know this house. Some things were left behind, the pool remembers. Hannah's father laughed them off. The neighborhood had teenagers, he said, kids with too much time, but Hannah's mother wasn't convinced. She began checking the locks every night and keeping the curtains closed after dark. Then Hannah saw the man. She was in the pool one afternoon, floating on her back, when she opened her eyes and noticed a figure standing behind the fence near the back tree line. A man in a dark hoodie, completely still, watching her from between the slats. She screamed. By the time her father ran outside, the figure was gone. Police took a report but found nothing. That should have been the end of it. Instead, things escalated. A back window was found unlatched. Ben's stuffed dinosaur disappeared and turned up in the deep end of the pool 2 days later. The motion lights in the yard kept switching on at random. Around 3 a.m. Hannah's mother began insisting the children sleep in the same room on weekends because she had a bad feeling. Then came the Polaroids one morning. Hannah woke up to her mother screaming downstairs. Spread across the kitchen table were 6 Polaroid photographs. One showed Hannah asleep in bed. Another showed Ben sitting on the floor of the playroom. One was taken from outside the bathroom window while her mother brushed her hair. And the last photo showed the family at dinner, taken through the sliding glass door from the backyard. Every picture had been taken from impossibly close range. Someone had been inside the property, maybe even inside the house. The police searched the entire home and yard. At first they found nothing. Then Ben mentioned he'd heard someone in the little house the night before. The little house was what he called the old pool storage shed near the back fence. Inside, tucked behind chlorine buckets and tangled hoses, officers found a sleeping bag, empty water bottles, food wrappers, and a box of Polaroid film. There was also a stack of older photographs, some of the family, some of previous owners, and some of the house itself from years earlier. The man had been living in the pool shed. He had likely been there for days, maybe weeks. Worse, detectives later discovered he had once worked landscaping jobs in the neighborhood and knew which houses were empty during the day. He had become fixated on the Mercer family after seeing them move in, and according to his own rambling statement after arrest, believed the house still belonged to him, because he had hidden there as a teenager years before. Hannah still refuses to swim in backyard pools, because sometimes the idea of a dream home is just that, an idea. And sometimes the worst nightmares are already waiting for you when you move in. When Lila Dawson moved into a shared rental house in southeast Portland during grad school, she thought the biggest problem would be balancing research, late-night papers, and the two roommates she barely knew. Instead, it was the man next door. Lila had a bad habit of stepping outside for a cigarette when her anxiety got too loud, usually around midnight. Sometimes later, the backyard wasn't much, just a narrow strip of grass, a leaning fence, and a single porch light that flickered if the wind hit it too hard. But it was private enough to let her breathe. At least it felt that way at first, the first time she noticed him. He was standing in his own yard on the other side of the fence, completely still, cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. His voice made her jump. He was older 40s maybe, with a gaunt face, hollow eyes, and a smile that never seemed to reach them. He introduced himself as Mason, said he'd lived there for years, and joked that the neighborhood got loud after midnight. Lila laughed politely, finished her cigarette, and went inside. The next night, he was there again, and the night after that, soon it felt like he always knew when she stepped outside. Sometimes she wouldn't even hear him approach. He'd simply be there already, leaning on the fence in the dark, asking questions in that same calm, almost intimate tone. What was she studying? Did she have a boyfriend? Which room was hers? The one with the lamp or the one with the plant? That last question made her stomach turn. Lila stopped going out at night after that. The problem was, Mason didn't stop. She started finding cigarette butts lined up along the fence directly below her bedroom window, even though she never smoked there. Then a six-pack of beer appeared on the back step with a sticky note attached. For our late-night talks, she threw it in the trash. The next morning, the empty bottles were back on the porch. One was sitting upright on the windowsill outside her room. Lila told her roommates, but they shrugged it off. One said Mason was weird but harmless. The other suggested she was scaring herself because she was stressed. For a few days she almost believed them. Then she woke to scratching. Not a loud noise, a slow, deliberate scrape against glass. It was 2:47 a.m. Lila sat upright in bed, frozen, listening as the sound continued. Scratch, pause, scratch, pause. Like someone dragging a fingernail across her bedroom window. Her room was on the first floor, facing the side yard. The curtains were thin enough that she could see the vague shape of something moving just beyond them. She couldn't scream. She couldn't move. Then the scratching stopped. A few seconds later, her phone buzzed, unknown number. A text message, "You look prettier when you're scared." Lila made a sound she still can't describe and called 911 with shaking hands. Police found Mason sitting in his kitchen when they arrived, acting confused and insulted. But outside Lila's window, in the damp soil, they found fresh footprints, and tucked behind an overgrown shrub was a milk crate. He'd been standing on it to look in. That alone wasn't enough to arrest him. What changed everything was the search warrant executed 2 days later after officers linked his phone to the anonymous text. In his garage, they found a notebook containing details about multiple women in the neighborhood, sketches of bedroom layouts, and a zippered pouch holding stolen objects, hair ties, photos, earrings, and a pack of cigarettes that belonged to Lila. She moved out before the month ended. To this day, she still hates smoking outside after dark, because sometimes the person you think you're sharing the night with is already trying to claim it. Derek Shaw and his friends had a winter tradition. One weekend every January, they drove out to a remote patch of forest in northern Pennsylvania, pitched tents in the snow, drank too much cheap whiskey, and pretended they were tougher than the cold. It was stupid, it was reckless, and Derek loved it. The year everything changed, there were only 4 of them: Derek, Noah, Brent, and Lucas. They hiked farther than usual, choosing a clearing off an old logging trail that felt isolated enough to be peaceful. By sunset, they had a fire going, gear unpacked, and the usual jokes flying. That night, while they sat around the flames, Noah stopped mid-sentence. "Did you hear that?" The woods had gone quiet. No wind, no branches shifting, just the hiss of fire and the heavy silence of snow-covered trees. Then came the scream. It sounded human. Not close, but not far either. The 4 men sat frozen, staring into the dark. Brent laughed nervously and said it was probably a fox. Lucas agreed too quickly. Derek wanted to believe them, but something about the sound had felt wrong. Too raw, too desperate, too sudden. They stayed by the fire longer than usual that night. No one admitted how shaken they were. The next morning, Derek found footprints circling the campsite. Not animal tracks, boot prints. A single set. They began at the tree line, looped around every tent, passed within feet of the fire pit, and disappeared back into the woods. Judging by the snow, they'd been made some time after everyone went to sleep. Noah wanted to leave immediately. Brent called him dramatic. They stayed. That decision almost got them killed. By late afternoon, Lucas went to relieve himself and came sprinting back into camp white-faced and gagging. 50 yards beyond the trees, half buried beneath snow and brush, they found a deer carcass strung upside down from a low branch. Its stomach had been cut open. Its eyes were gone, tied around one hind. Leg was a strip of red flannel. Brent stared at it in silence, then slowly looked down at his own torn jacket sleeve. Nobody laughed after that. They packed in total silence, hands fumbling from panic and cold. The sun was already dropping by the time they reached the trailhead, and the parking area looked wrong the moment they stepped into it. Derek's truck was there, but the windshield was shattered. All 4 tires had been slashed, and carved into the frost on the driver's side window, in uneven block letters, was a message. "You shouldn't have come," Noah swore. Brent nearly started crying. Lucas kept turning in circles, scanning the tree line like he expected someone to step out at any second. That's when Derek saw him, a figure standing between the trees, maybe 80 yards back, tall, motionless, wearing what looked like a dark coat, or maybe hunting gear. Too far away to make out a face, but close enough to know he was watching, Derek shouted. The figure didn't move. Brent threw a rock. Still nothing. Then, just as suddenly as he'd appeared, the man stepped backward and vanished into the forest. The 4 of them ran. They left half their gear, abandoned the truck, and followed the logging road on foot until they reached a ranger station nearly 4 miles away. By the time police returned with them, the figure was gone. No body, no campsite, no clear trail, just the wrecked truck, the deer carcass, and a scattering of boot prints that disappeared into frozen ground too hard to track. Officials suggested a hunter, a drifter, maybe someone mentally unstable living off-grid. Derek didn't care what label they used. He knew what he'd felt in those woods. That man had watched them all night, circled their tents, marked their truck, and if they had stayed 1 more hour, Derek is certain he wouldn't be telling the story now. They never went camping again, and every January, when the air turns sharp and the trees go still, Derek remembers the silence before that scream. because sometimes the forest doesn't feel empty, because it isn't. The summer of 2005 was the year Rachel Pierce stopped riding her bike alone. She was 14, living in Astoria, Queens, and like most kids her age, she spent nearly every afternoon outside. Her parents trusted her because the neighborhood felt safe. Tree-lined streets, corner stores, dog walkers, old women on stoops. Rachel rode the same loop every day, circling the park, stopping for iced tea and cutting through the quieter side streets before heading home before dark. That's where she first noticed him, a tall man in his 30s walking a golden retriever. At first he seemed forgettable, just another neighbour. But after a week, Rachel realised she was seeing him too often and never by accident. He'd been near the deli when she stopped for a drink, at the park when she passed the benches, on the same side street she used as a shortcut home, always smiling, always watching, always close enough to make her uneasy. The dog was what made him seem harmless. When he finally spoke to her, it was in the soft, casual voice adults use when they want kids to trust them. "Hey," he said, crouching to pet the dog. "She likes you, want to say hi." Rachel mumbled no and pedalled away. The next day, he knew her name. "Rachel," he called from across the sidewalk. "You dropped your bracelet yesterday." She hadn't. She rode home faster than she ever had in her life. That night, she told her mother, who immediately said it was probably someone from the neighbourhood who'd overheard her friends calling for her. Rachel wanted to believe that, but deep down she knew the truth. The man had been watching her long enough to learn her route, long enough to learn her name. Then the phone call started. Their house phone rang after midnight, 3 nights in a row. Each time when Rachel's father answered, no one spoke. On the 4th night, Rachel picked up first. A man whispered, "You should lock your window." Then the line went dead. Her parents called the police, but with no caller ID and no proof, there was little they could do. Her father checked every window in the house, and that was when they found Rachel's bedroom screen partially cut near the bottom corner. After that, she wasn't allowed outside alone. For a while, the man disappeared. Then one Saturday afternoon, Rachel came home from a friend's house and saw the golden retriever tied to the fence outside her home. The dog was alone. Its leash was looped carefully around the metal post, and tucked beneath the collar was a folded note. Rachel stared at it, too terrified to move. Her father ran outside, snatched the note, and shoved Rachel back into the house. The paper contained only 5 words. "I know which room is yours." Police finally took it seriously. They canvassed the area, questioned neighbours, and eventually connected the description to a man who had been seen loitering near a middle school a few blocks away. When they searched his apartment, they found maps of the neighbourhood, photos of several teenage girls, and multiple pictures of Rachel riding her bike taken from different distances on different days. The golden retriever wasn't even his. He had borrowed it from his sister because, in his own words, people trust dog owners. Rachel is in her 30s now, but she still remembers the way that Dog looked standing outside her house, tail wagging, completely unaware of what it had been used for. And to this day, whenever she sees a man smiling too easily with a friendly dog at his side, she crosses the street,